I'll explain some flamenco to you guys too, the technical parts, because I'm sure you guys know it, but you really don't know it. So we'll talk about that. So the first song is Soleares, which is considered the um, first form of pure flamenco. All the other forms came from Soleares. So we're going to play Solea, which is slow, and then we're going to speed it up a little bit, and I'll go to Solea por Bulería. And then at the end, we'll end it with Bulerías. Yeah? Okay. Hopefully, can you guys hear it? put him in flamenco classes. And my daughter Dominique quit. She didn't want to do it. She didn't want to wear a dress. And the other one did it for a while. It was super cute. We did a couple performances. And then the other one quit, and then about a year or two later, she's like, Dad, I think I want to do flamenco. I'm like, really? That's awesome. So I looked at my daughter, Dominique. I'm like, what about you, Dominique? She's like, Dad, I'd rather play the tuba. I was hoping. She's a soccer player. So then a couple days later, everybody's laughing. A couple days later, she's like, Dad? I'm like, yeah. What's up, Dominique? She's like, what's a tuba? She had no idea. She knew she did not want to dance flamenco. It's too bad because it's just a fun way of expressing yourself, just like any other art form. So the whole flamenco thing, my dad was my first teacher.
The sound.
You want more sound? Okay. My dad was can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My dad was my first flamenco teacher, and then I went to Mariano, Córdoba, and that was pretty amazing. And then Mariano he was like, when you finish college, you go to Spain. And I was at San Jose State, not doing very well because I was like 20 years old, fake ID, partying a lot. Played in a rock band, and weird things were happening. I wasn't doing well academically. One of my best friends, he was in my band. He tragically died. It was just a weird time in my life. And my dad did high tech, and my dad says, came home one day, he's like, they offered me a job in Barcelona. And I'm like, hey, new chance on life, kind of turn things around. He's all, I know you're going to finish your degree and then go study. He's all, but why don't you just go to Spain and study now with the family? I'm like, it was the best thing that ever could have happened to me in my life. And it was a time where I kind of really wanted to know a little bit about myself, where I came from. So we packed it up, and I remember in August of, I think, 89, we got on a plane, which I hated flying. And by the way, I hated seafood at the time. And in Spain, everybody here been to Spain, I hope? Who hasn't been to Spain? You got to go to Spain. Spain's an amazing country. So anyhow, you show up in Spain and got on a plane. It's a long flight. Got there, and I started studying with a guy named Chicuelo, and he's considered one of the probably top 5 guitar players in the world for flamenco now. And he was only 19 or 20, and I was 21. And I'm like, who's this young punk going to teach me? But he was amazing. And it was humbling, right, for this guy. So I went there, I studied with him, and still didn't quite. What was interesting about going to Spain? I look at a lot of people here. You guys definitely look Spanish. Going to Spain was weird because growing up in the United States, I always felt like I kind of looked like myself. I didn't look like anybody else. But then all of a sudden you go to Spain and you look like everybody else there. And I'm like, I don't know if I like this because I kind of like having a unique look to myself. So the cool thing about Spain is I'm not a native speaker, but my Spanish is pretty good. If I didn't open my mouth in Spain, everybody thought I was Spanish. It wasn't until I started talking, they're like, hey, tú no eres de aquí. I'm like, yeah, you caught me. But, and it's interesting, we all have this common link, but you go to Spain, a lot of them won't accept you. Even if you say, hey, my grandfather or whatever was Spain, you're American, right? But we'll get to that story too in a little bit, which was a pretty fun story. So anyhow, in flamenco, we have different types of flamenco. You have your deep flamenco. So flamenco really, you could divide it into 2 categories: pain and suffering and happiness. If you, the gypsies love to take all the credit for flamenco, but that's not necessarily the case. So you're either suffering and miserable, and when you're not, you're having the biggest party of your life, and then for the next week you have no money for groceries or whatever, but they don't care, right? If you ever go to Spain, you go to a flamenco party, they last for like days. Like nobody sleeps. It's pretty cool. It's a different way of life. But so in the flamenco world, we have all these different types of flamenco. But the piece I'd like to play for you guys is it's called Guajira. And Guajira is when the Spaniards went throughout the world to the Americas. One of the first places they came to was Cuba. And what they did is the Spaniards love music, so they took the music from Cuba and they incorporated it into flamenco. And they call it ida y vuelta, so it was round trip. They went there and then they brought it back and then they incorporated it. So Guajira, you guys probably heard that song. Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera. Come on, you guys could all sing this with me. Guantanamera. Guajira, Guantanamera, is a woman from Guantanamo Bay, right? And so Guajira is a person who worked in the sugarcane. Guess what our ancestors did? They worked in the sugarcane, right? So it made a lot of sense. So this piece I'd like to play for you is a Guajira. It's an interesting timing. So flamenco music has very interesting meter to it. If you know anything about music, you know, we're used to like waltz 1 2 3 1 2 3 or 4 4 1 2 3 4, and there's some of that in flamenco, but this is kind of a weird beat. It's like so it's got like two different rhythms going on with it, right? And they picked it up from the Tainos who were in Cuba, Puerto Rico, that area. So anyhow, we're gonna play a little Guajira for you. Yeah, has nothing to do with Guantanamera. Can't sing it. It's a beautiful song, usually danced by a woman. So this, what I'm doing today, is flamenco solo. Next weekend I'm playing for dancers, singers. I'm doing one solo. So very different performance. These are really cool for me, but I don't do these very often. But anyhow, Guajira. So when I first started, I said I was always doing some research, trying to figure out a little bit about ourselves. So a couple years ago, I go online, and I see this book called the Heliopolis. I'm like, huh, what's this? And first thing I want to do, I'm like, is this something old? What is this? And I look a little bit more, and I think it was like 2021, and the book was published in 2021. I'm like, whoa, this is kind of weird, because there was nothing there, right? There were some manuscripts, there were certain things, but this was a book. So I wanted to get the book, so I wanted to read about it. So I wrote to him. I wrote him on email. I found him on Facebook. I found all these places and nothing. I'm like, it's kind of a bummer. About a week goes by, and then I get this Facebook. He's all, hey, you speak Spanish? I'm like, yeah, I speak okay Spanish. It was Miguel. He's all, where's your family from? And I said, well, my grandfather was Francisco Marqués, and I gave him this information. He says, well, I want you to give me, I want you to give me the city, the town he was born in. I want to know the family. I want to know the boat. Just give me any information you can. I said, okay. So it was late. It was like 11 or 12, and I was tired. So I went to bed, and I thought, well, in the morning, I'm going to send him this information. I wake up in the morning, and there's this message from Miguel. He's all, your family was from Pinos Puentes. Your grandfather was on this ship. Here's your grandfather's brothers and sisters. He gave me entire history. What I had been looking for 20 years, he gave to me in one day in a message. And I was blown away. And then he found out I played flamenco guitar, and he was just scratching his head. He's also, what do you do for a living? I'm like, I teach Spanish. And he's like, 100 years later, you still speak Spanish, you play flamenco guitar, and you come to Spain. He's all, this is weird. This is really weird. He's all, because I figured you'd be very American at this point. But a lot of us still keep our Spanish roots, right? So Miguel, if you guys go to the conference next year, which I hope to see everybody there, I'm planning on going. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Really cool dude. He works for the University of Malaga. And he's really, if it wasn't for him, I don't know if we'd be here right now, right? Because he really was instrumental of putting the documentary together. And he did it, I was explaining to these people over here, he really did it not for us, but for the Spanish people, because the Spanish people wanted to know what happened to their ancestors. Why'd they go? What happened to them? Because 8,000 went, and most of them lost contact with their families. So Miguel, he always does research. He's always writing books. So he's in Malaga, and he goes to this little museum. I mean, it's tiny. It's like probably the size of this barn. And he's checking out some information because he's doing research. And he looks up, and you guys see the poster? It says Hawaii.
Yeah, I got one back here.
Yeah, so well, he sees it in this museum, and he asks the lady working there, he says, what was that? She's like, I don't know. She's all, there were some Spaniards that went to Hawaii. He's like, oh, that's interesting. So he like takes a picture, he writes it down, puts it in a box. So all of his ideas he puts in a box. A couple years later, he goes back to the museum, and he sees it again. And he just kind of looks at it. He's like, okay. And then about a year later, he decides to do some research. And then he finds out, all these Spaniards went 8,000 to Hawaii. And then he does more research. And then he starts sharing it with colleagues. And they consider it a lost chapter in Spanish history, and a very important one. So he writes his book, and then the book really takes off in Spain. So he wrote this for the Spaniards, wondering what happened to their ancestors. Not really, they didn't really care about us. Like, we wanted to know why we came, we came here. They really wanted to know about what happened to them. So he writes this, and then it catches fire, and everybody in Spain wants to know about this. And next thing you know, Miguel is going all over Spain doing these conferences. So then Miguel says, hey, you don't mind if I use one of your pictures, do you? I'm like, nah, that's fine. So if you go to my Facebook picture, there's a picture of me playing guitar. So he starts his conferences with a picture of me, and he says, he's all, what is that? He was like, vamos, hombre, un guitarrista flamenco, right? It's a flamenco guitar player, right? It's easy. He says, no, he's a descendant of the Spaniards that went to Hawaii. And he plays flamenco guitar, and all of a sudden everybody's like, oh my God, right? It's like this big shock thing. And he loves starting off his speeches that way. And so anyhow, we get to know each other, and he says, he calls me up a couple of months later. He says, the Spanish government found out about this. And if you know anything about Spain, history is very important to them and their culture. He's all, they want to do a documentary. I said, wow, that's amazing. And they're going to spend some quality money, bring in a big crew to do this. He says, we'd like you to be part of it. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I want to be on TV. I'm pretty cheesy, but I'm like, yeah. So I really struggled with it because, quite honestly, I'm like, I didn't really know if I wanted to do it. But it was in June, and I do a study abroad in June. I bring students from my college, young students, well, all ages, and we study in Spain. And so I was there, and he's like, I want you to come out for 2 or 3 days, and we're going to film. We're going to go to where your grandfather was born. We're going to interview some people. And I thought, this is kind of a chance of a lifetime. And I didn't want to go, and then this girl I was dating at the time, she convinced me to go. So I went, and it was one of the highlights of my life to be able to experience it. And I was with all these Spaniards that really kind of took me in, made sure I was okay. So I was in Sevilla. The next day I'm on a train to Malaga, and we get to Malaga, and I felt like I was a superstar. I mean, there was journalists everywhere, video cameras. I'm like, whoa, this is kind of cool. I could get used to this. And then if you read the book or you look into it, the first book, Heliopolis, the first ship, left from Malaga. So my grandfather's family from Granada, a little town called Pinos Puentes, they traveled all the way to Malaga, and if you read it, it didn't start off on the right foot, right? They had to postpone it. It was really bad conditions. And so we're there, and Miguel says, we want to film where the boat took off from. And I knew this place, but I didn't know where my grandfather had taken off there. So we go there, and at the time there was this huge yacht, huge. It was massive, and some guy owned it, some rich dude. So it was blocked off, security, so we got permission to go down there, and we're filming, and he's asking me these questions. Next thing you know, we look up, and there's like probably 100 people looking at us. They thought it was my boat. And we had cops there, and, making sure we're okay. And Miguel and I, it was like first time we met, we just were dying laughing inside. And I'm like, this guy's a cool dude. And we didn't tell the people it wasn't my boat, but if you see the documentary, you'll see that there's a part where we're talking, and it comes up. So anyhow, the next day, he says, we're going to go to Pino Puentes, which is a little town in Granada. And he said, pero hora Inglaterra Británica. Do you guys know what that means? Hora Británica? Not Spanish time, we're on British time. So I'm picking you up at 9, which means 9. It's 9:30, 10 o'clock. Because you know how Spaniards are, right? Mañana, right? No, it's like hora Británica. So they pick me up, and there's a camera crew. I meet all these people. I'm with a bunch of strangers. I'm like, hey, let's do this. We go to the town, and it was amazing. It was overwhelming. But what was interesting was we got to the town, and a lot of gypsies there. Lots of gypsies. And so we're filming, and all these gypsies are like on motorcycles and everything, like in the background, like photobombing because they wanted to be on TV. And then we had a historian from that area that I met, Franci. He's in the documentary. If you watch the documentary, you'll see it. And he's all, do you have any questions? I'm like, yeah, can we see where my grandfather was born? And he's like, not today. I'm like, okay. He's all, but we'll plan it out. He's all, I'm like, okay. He's all, but because if we go with the cameras, we will leave without cameras and without shoes. We have to go ask the gypsy matriarch or the patriarch for permission. So my grandfather's neighborhood where he was born at the time was Payo, and then it converted over. So we were not welcomed because we didn't have permission. So it was kind of interesting. So yeah, we do this big 12-hour session at the end. We're all happy. We film, and we're getting ready to leave. And everybody's kind of quiet, and we're just talking. And I'm like, in Spanish, I'm like, I kind of understand why my grandfather would leave this place. There's not much here. And everybody dies laughing. They're like, oh my God, we didn't want to say anything. But yeah, what a depressing place. I hope this doesn't go public. People in Pinos Puente are going to want to kill me. But it was a depressing place. I'm like, my God, get me out of here, right? It was cool to see where he was from, but oh man.
But did you meet any of your relatives?
I'll get to that too. Not in the town. So apparently in that town, I have a cousin that's a well-known flamenco singer. So the next part of the documentary, we're supposed to get together and we're supposed to record, which is kind of cool. So interestingly enough, we do the documentary. It's all over Spanish TV, and documentaries don't just show once. They show them over and over and over. All these friends of mine that I know from Spain were like sending me video clips like, hey, I saw you on TV. I didn't know you were famous. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not really famous, but whatever. So everybody saw it. And then my cousin Larry is named after my dad, Larry, Lorenzo. He sends me this weird email from some lady in Spain. She says, hey, I think we might be cousins. And he's all, but I think he's trying to get a hold of your dad, not me. So I reach out to this lady and we start talking. She's all, I was watching this documentary, so I'm from Madrid. She's all, my family left from Avila to Hawaii. Your mom, your grandma, same thing, because in the documentary we talk about it. So we do the DNA thing, and we're cousins. And she discovered us from this documentary. It was weird. I haven't met her yet. I'm going to Spain in like 3 weeks. So I'm hoping maybe I'll go visit her. But it was fascinating. So the question was, do you know any of your cousins? Through this documentary and stuff, I've gotten to meet some of my cousins. It's fascinating, right? And really cool. And they want to introduce me to more cousins. So I've met probably about 10 of my cousins. It's real. We had no contact with them. I know you guys in the back, you have contact with your cousins, which is amazing. Anybody else have contact with their? See, that's fascinating to me. Man, you guys are blessed and lucky.
And they made contact going to Spain.
Is that right? That's so cool.
Went to Ben Ohan and found out everybody was a cousin.
Right? Right? Isn't that crazy?
More seal.
Yeah. So in the documentary, there's this cute gal. Her name's Vicky. She's a blondie in there if you watch it. The big mystery for her was she wanted to know what happened to her grandfather or great-grandfather. He left. He had a family, and he left to get money to send it back home. He came back once in his lifetime, and he never came back. So they think that he started another family, right? And so for her, it's just, I want to know what happened to my family. I just want to know. I want to meet my cousins. It was fascinating. So we do the documentary, and then they have the big grand opening, the red carpet, like the mayor of Malaga's there, the governor of Malaga's there, like all these fancy people there. So I end up going, and the theater's full. They play the documentary, and the entire documentary, people are crying. They're just so filled with emotion because they're hearing these stories of their family members and what happened. And at the end, there was like a standing ovation and people went crazy. It was like, I still get like goosebumps thinking about this occasion. And then at the end, we had a question and answer thing, and I was pretty much the only one that was fluent in Spanish, so they picked a lot of questions for me. But one of the things I told them, I said, although I'm American and I grew up American, there's a big part of me that's still Spanish. And there's a big part of me that wants to know more about, I consider myself a born-again Spaniard because I'm really American, but there's a lot of Spanish in me. And just like all you guys here, I look around and I see it, right? And it's exciting, it's fun. So that was a really cool experience. And let's get back to music here. Usually when I do concerts, I don't talk that much, but I just think this is an occasion, right? We could share experiences with each other. So this next song is part of the classical repertoire. It's called Recuerdos de la Alhambra. It's a very famous classical piece. And who's been to Granada here? Let me see some. Oh my God, man! I'm with my paisanos here. What's up with that? I don't even have to tell you these stories. I'll just play guitar. But you've been to the Alhambra, right?
Oh, yes.
you got to go to the Alhambra. Every year it gets voted one of the greatest wonders of the world. Never makes it top 7, but it's right up there. So the Alhambra was built by the Moors, right? They came to Spain in 711. I'm giving a Spanish class now. 711, they left in 1492. They were there almost 800 years. And one of the things they built was the Alhambra, which is amazing. It's all handmade. I bring my students, they're like, oh yeah, this is cool. And they walk to the next room. I'm like, no, come back here. This is handmade. This took probably 100 years, right? It took hundreds of years to build this thing. So in 1492, Ferdinand and Isabel reconquer Spain. And Granada is one of the last strongholds for the Moorish Empire. And so there's this very famous poem, and it talks about the king loses the last war, and Spain is kicking him out. And he's leaving Granada, and he looks for one last time to the Alhambra, which is the royal palace, and there's a tear in his eye, because he knows that will be the last time he will ever see it. And it was built by his father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, and he's the one that lost it. And there's a famous expression that his wife tells him. Some people say it was his mom, some people say it was his wife. I don't know, you guys can figure it out for yourself. But it said, llora, llora como una mujer, porque no has luchado como un hombre. Do you guys know what that means? Cry like a woman, because you didn't fight like a man, right? And that's what the wife... as the wife told him, or the mom, I don't remember. So anyhow, Tárrega, Francisco Tárrega, one of the greatest classical guitar players from Spain, in my opinion, the best, took this moment and wrote a song. And it's called Recuerdos de la Alhambra, Memories of the Alhambra. Yeah. So here we go. It's a slow song. Doesn't pick up.
Primo.
Any questions? Anything? I talked about a lot. I could talk forever.
No, I
Yeah.
How can we watch this documentary?
It's on YouTube. So
we'll get the name of it and we'll send
Yeah.
everybody a link.
so this is really interesting. It was all in Spanish, right? And so when they had the English parts, it was subtitled in Spanish. And the author Miguel really wanted it in English. So I talked to my family and my cousins, and we pitched in a couple bucks, and they were able to do an English version too. So there's two versions, but the English version's hard to find. But I'll be happy to send that link to you.
Okay.
Right? I really wanted it from my family, and Miguel. I hope you guys get a chance to meet him. Cool dude. Every year I go back to Spain and we get together. The whole crew. We have this big party once a year.
He's attending the conference next year.
I know, that's wonderful. And his wife's and me. I met his wife, everybody. He's a really good dude. And out of all books he's written, I think this was the main one that really put him on the map. And he told me, he's like, I do a lot of books, I do a lot of documentaries, but this is the one I'll have friends for a lifetime. And we've formed these really cool bonds. And so I would encourage you to go next year if you can. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I think there's going to be a lot of people to share their stories with each other. My family went from Spain to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii to the Bay Area. A lot of them were in the Hayward area. I didn't really know that side that much. And then my grandfather then went, it was interesting, they went to San Francisco, and then they went to South City, and then they went to Daly City, and then they went to Santa Clara, and then we eventually ended up in Coria. We just kept on coming south here.
And ours came the other way, Santa Barbara to Hollister because there was work.
Big Hollister
And
Spanish
then
community.
there was no work, and so they came to Redwood City.
Yes. So a couple years ago, I'm in Hollister because it's right next to us, and there's a Spanish flag. I'm like, what's a Spanish flag doing in Hollister? Some guy's like, there's some Spanish thing. And so I reached out to this guy. His name's Jose Postigo. I'm like, what's this about, Jose? He's all, we have a Spanish society here.
Yeah.
I'm all, what? And he's all, yeah. And I tell him about myself, and all of a sudden there's this bond, right? And now every year we go play for this Spanish society with the whole big group. It's amazing. I had no idea. It's fascinating to find out all these people that we have all this in common with. It's amazing. Super blessed. So anyhow, I'm gonna do one last song for you, and it's really not even part of flamenco, but it's probably the most famous flamenco song. And the reason why I want to do it is because the Heliopolis left from Malaga. And so what song is from Malaga? Malagueña, right? Malagueña. So I'm going to finish with this, and then I'm going to be ready for some more wine, and I'd love to chat with you guys. I'm really curious to hear everybody's story. So last song, Malagueña. Thank you guys for letting me share a little bit of me and my music with you. It's been a real pleasure. Yeah. Thank you. And there's a possibility I might be performing at next year's event in Davis. So we're talking about that with the whole group. It's going to be a lot of fun. So now, Malagueña was written by Ernesto Lacuna. He was a famous composer from Cuba. But he fell in love with Spain. And he fell in love with Malagueñas. You know what a Malagueña is? It's a beautiful lady from Malaga, right? Malagueña. So here's Malagueña. Let's use a capo for this one.